Back again with another green screen reading. I've not done one of these since the last Align Through Time one. I kind of just need some simple content out while I'm working on the Sonic Align Through Time to come out later this month. So this one was a Cannonball episode I had planned, and you'll be able to tell roughly when I was working on this based on where it gets up to in the script, because it's unfinished, obviously. Essentially, it was just talking about the history of the mainline DC universe and how it would always change with the different reboots and whatnot. But while I wrote a good chunk of it, there were still sections that I still needed to do some research on to try and fully understand, like Zero Hour in particular. After that, before I could get back to working on it, other big events came out, like Death Metal and whatever the other one that has a similar name is. And I think there's been 3 or 4 big shakeups to the DC multiverse since. And I've reached a point where I just don't understand this. I'm never going to get on top of all this. It was much simpler when I started work on this, so here's what it is. As per usual, I'll be looking over here, and that means that I'm reading the script, then I'll look back over here to say anything that feels worth bringing up. So let's go. The long-running narrative of the main DC universe is a fascinating one, told over not far off a century at this point. What started as a simple collection of series with tenuous connections transformed into a vast web of multiverses and retcons that can be somewhat intimidating for new readers, according to DC anyway. Yeah, personally, I've never really been subscribed to the idea that people really struggle to get into comics because they don't have an easy jumping on point. If that was really true, DC would be fucked, because every time they try to make things easier, they actually make it worse. DC just wouldn't be around anymore, but somehow they still are. So I think they've always over-exaggerated it, intentionally or otherwise, and now things are just completely unmanageable. So let's go back to the beginning and see if we can untangle this yarn ball of a canon. Welcome to Cannonball. DC's history goes back to 1934, but it was only with the April 1938 release of Action Comics #1 and the introduction of Superman that the DC Universe storyline began. DC would introduce a number of other superheroes over the next few years, such as Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern. However, these characters existed completely removed from one another until All-Star Comics #3 from 1940, where the Justice Society of America, a team uniting all the heroes as a group, was formed. This is where we first firmly had a singular DC universe. And then have a note to say, check if Batman and Superman met before that. There's a decent chance that was the case, but ultimately, because I scrapped this project, I never needed to go back to check that. Towards the end of World War II, superhero comic sales were on the wane, with other genres such as westerns and sci-fi taking their place. Lots of superhero comics such as Green Lantern and The Flash were outright cancelled. Pretty much the only superhero works DC kept going through the early 50s were titles surrounding Batman, Superman and Wonder Woman, which may have helped to establish the trio as the so-called Trinity. With spurious allegations of links between comics and juvenile delinquency, making comics the video games of yesteryear, the Comics Code Authority was formed in 1954 to regulate comic content, effectively killing most other genres, giving superheroes more footing again. So I guess this thing was not just about that. I mean, this stuff may have been trimmed down or removed entirely, because this is basically just the history of the genre at this point. I don't know if this would have remained in a final version, but if I were to right now say I'm going to go and finish this script, I would probably trim a lot of that stuff out. In October 1956, DC released Showcase #4, debuting Barry Allen, the new Flash. The new take was a huge hit, and DC followed suit by reimagining Green Lantern from Man with Magic Lantern to Space Cop. Now, this is where we have our first continuity problem. Barry Allen was now meeting up with the likes of Batman and Superman, who were still the same characters from the Golden Age. But his debut issue established him as having taken his name and theme from comics he enjoyed about the fictional superhero, the Jay Garrick Flash from the Golden Age, because copyright does not exist in the DCU. So how could Barry meet all these heroes who had also met the fictional original Flash? They could have simply shrugged it off as those comics being made up stories based on the real heroes, but the solution was far more creative. The Flash #123 from September 1961 featured the story Flash of Two Worlds, establishing that Jay Garrick was very much real, but in a parallel universe named Earth 2 by Barry. This was the beginning of the DC multiverse and ultimately reshaped the direction the setting would go from here. The idea was that pretty much every DC story released prior to Barry's debut took place on Earth 2, while everything since was set on Earth 1, where heroes debuted around 2 decades later than on Earth 2. There are people who have theorized that certain stories are set on Earth 1 and Earth 2. There was someone apparently who did this with Superman, went through like all the Superman comics from the Silver Age and whatnot, and was like, okay, so this thing is referenced, so that suggests that this ties to Earth 1, but this one suggests it's Earth 2. I heard about it in Alex Lennon's big video on Superman's history. That's a really good video, check that out. Future me put that as the recommended video at the end of this one. So there are things that don't necessarily work with this particular explanation, but for a simple overview, it still holds up. And those are our first two DCUs, the original Golden Age Earth 2 and the Silver Age Earth 1. Writers would have fun with the concept of parallel universes, telling non-canon stories and exploring ideas that Earth 1 couldn't, such as Batman and Catwoman having a daughter, or Supergirl growing up and developing massive boobs. But as we roll into the 1980s, things were becoming messy. Aside from now having a vast multiverse, DC was also realising that they were coming up on 50 years of continuity, which had been taken far more seriously in recent years. Yeah, in the early days, they just weren't consistent at all, but at a certain point, would have been during the Silver Age, but when about, I don't know. Things just got a lot more serious with continuity, and nowadays continuity kind of dominates the entire narrative, I would say, because you get comics that exist sometimes just to explain continuity issues, or to cause continuity issues by retconning things that people didn't like. Concluding that this could be a major roadblock preventing new readers from getting into their comics, writer Marv Wolfman conceived a plan to fix all of DC's problems in one fell swoop. I would have to double check that. I'm not sure if Marv Wolfman came up with the idea or if he was just chosen to work on it, or if they were taking pitches for what they wanted to do and that's the one they went with. I don't recall anyone saying Marv Wolfman came up with the idea. I don't know if I already researched this and found that the answer is yes, or made an assumption that can be fixed in a second draft, but that's something I would go back and look into just to be sure. From April 1985 to March 1986, DC published the event miniseries Crisis on Infinite Earths, one of the very first of such events. The event had four primary goals: celebrate 50 years of DC stories, both large and small, to get rid of the multiverse and establish a single cohesive DCU, to streamline the continuity, rewriting and simplifying the setting's history to be easier for newcomers. I don't have the word "and" here, so I'm assuming that this was originally just a numbered list. I copied this from my DeviantArt stash into a Word document, and some things didn't carry over, so I assume this would have been numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. To integrate characters from former rivals that DC had purchased into the DCU, such as Charlton Comics and Fawcett publications. The story sees an all-powerful entity known as the Anti-Monitor attempting to destroy the entire multiverse. The heroes of the remaining Earths band together to battle him, losing many allies such as Barry Allen and Supergirl, eventually culminating in the Anti-Monitor's death at the hands of Earth 2 Superman. By the end, only 5 Earths remain: Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 4, home of the Charlton heroes, Earth S, home of the Fawcett heroes, and Earth X, the Nazi-ruled Earth where the freedom fighters of Earth 2 currently reside. Yes, even Earth Prime, our Earth, was destroyed. Yeah, sorry to have to be the one to tell you, but you've been dead since 1985. It's like MGS5 all over again. That was meant to be like a callback, kind of, to a joke I was planning to make in the MGS5 Wasted Potential, about the whole Big Boss Venom Snake thing and the big reveal at the end of the game. And basically the idea was me saying, yeah, player, you've been dead since 1995, or maybe in 87 when the original game came out. So this was kind of reflective of that, but I'm pretty sure that joke came first, even though that video wouldn't get made until multiple years later. It just shows you what can happen. Sometimes you're really in the zone on a script and then you either just can't be arsed with the editing, footage collection, or some other thing happens. Sometimes you just have a fully formed idea and it just doesn't pan out, even if you put a bunch of work into it. This is one of the good examples of that. The 5 universes are then merged into one, known as New Earth, which is our third main DCU, first named in World's Finest number 241. New Earth would remain as the sole Earth outside of pocket universes, which was basically an excuse to tell non-canon stories without having a multiverse. DC tried to explain the idea over the coming years with the concept of hypertime established to justify the existence of the Kingdom Come universe. The idea is that there are other timelines that branch off from New Earth which can overlap and change history, basically giving a permanent justification for sudden random retcons that I'm sure the writers at NetherRealm would love to implement into their stories. I said when I wrote most of this back in 2018 before MK11 revealed the writers had done exactly that because MK picked up a nasty SCD from its time in bed with DC. Yeah, wow. So not only did I write this originally in 2018 before MK11, this is in a pre-MK11 world, I then came back sometime after MK11 released in 2019 for another pass at this script and inserted that joke. More behind the scenes shenanigans, I guess. So then I got a note here, there's 2 of these throughout the script to remind me to look up Zero Hour because I wasn't really familiar with that one. Because I knew that made some changes. It wasn't like a big overhaul, but it changed a few bits of continuity here or there in the long run. But I wasn't sure what they were. So I made a note to look into that and just never got around to it. The concept of hypertime was a little too convoluted for most writers and readers, so a more traditional multiverse would return with 2005's Infinite Crisis, the direct sequel and 20th anniversary celebration of the original Crisis. This story sees the other survivors of the Crisis, Earth 2 Superman and Lois Lane, Earth 3 Alexander Luthor, and Earth Prime Superboy, grow weary of how dark the DCU has gotten, vowing to restore the multiverse and create the perfect Earth. Alexander and Superboy Prime are revealed as villains, and the two original Supermen team up to defeat them, resulting in many deaths, including the Earth Prime and New Earth Superboys, and Earth 2 Superman. While the misplaced allegory of Superboy Prime as a representation of fanboy rage was rather insulting, the restoration of the multiverse was appreciated. I was about to just explain my thoughts on that in more depth, but I can't really put it into words. So I think if I was doing another take on the script now, I'd probably remove that part, because if I can't really convey it in words, then there's just no point including it, because it does come across somewhat confrontational. Either that's not the intent, which is ironic, because the whole character is in fact meant to be a representation of confrontational fandom. Fitting, but I'd probably remove it, just like I removed the bit where I attempted to explain it from this video, so, you know. Despite the multiverse returning, New Earth was only very briefly split up into the 4 previous Earths. It would remain as one Earth through 2011, when the next big change would come. Concluding once again that the continuity was a mess, DC decided to go for its second reboot. Yeah, people talk about DC constantly rebooting, it's actually only done it twice. They've done shake-ups to the continuity and the multiverse and whatnot, but there's only actually been 2 reboots as far as I'm aware. I suppose you could argue maybe that something like Rebirth counts, but I really only consider the original Crisis and Flashpoint / New 52 to be those. Maybe there's been another one since and I've just not noticed. I can't keep up with this. This time it was rather unceremonious, piggybacking off of the Flash story, Flashpoint, to have the recently resurrected Barry Allen create a paradox that forces the entire multiverse to reboot itself. Perhaps it was because we had already had Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis within the previous 6 years, but for bringing out greater change than either of those two events, this seemed kind of weak. In undoing the bleak, dying Flashpoint timeline, Barry once again brings about significant change to the DCU. The New 52 reboot ushered in Prime Earth. In this universe, superheroes have only been around for 5 years, 10 in the case of Batman and Green Lantern, because all those sidekicks and space cops in 5 years is ludicrous. I would probably extend that a little bit, add the fact that originally those two were 5 years, and then people said, wait, he's on his like 4th Robin in 5 years, and there's been 4, 5 Earth-based Green Lanterns in all that time, and DC were like, yeah, let's make it 10 years, and it's like, it really does show how poorly planned the New 52 was. Absolute nonsense. The Fawcett and Charleston characters remained part of Prime Earth, but Earth 2's inhabitants were separated off into a new Earth 2, which doesn't come across in speech, but the original Earth 2 is spelled as a word, and then the rebooted version is the number 2, where they were the next generation of heroes following the deaths of the Trinity. In addition, the Wildstorm universe, formerly part of the Image Comics universe, became part of Prime Earth. DC's mature audience's Vertigo imprint also became a much more prominent part of the DCU through this. So this is the thing I struggled with for a while, was trying to figure out what exactly Vertigo was, because I'm like, surely characters like John Constantine were part of the DC universe before Flashpoint, right? So from what I understand, it's something like, it was basically like the Marvel Netflix shows. It's part of it, but it doesn't really get brought up in the other work so much. With the reboot, it became much more common to see these characters interacting, so now it's like the difference between Daredevil Netflix and Daredevil Born Again. That's what I think is going on. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think that's how it goes. Many fans were discontent with the sudden reboot that even the writers were allegedly only given a few months to prepare for, so DC decided to do something right for once and introduced the Rebirth Initiative following the 2016 Convergence event. Convergence involves Brainiac bringing together various universes and sees a few heroes travel back in time to prevent the original collapse of the multiverse. The end result is that all previous universes now exist at the same time in separate multiverses, including the pre-Crisis Infinite Multiverse, New Earth and the multiverse established in 52, and the New 52 multiverse, as well as other media multiverses such as the Arrowverse and Injustice. I'm not sure whether those are part of this as well, Arrowverse and Injustice. This is something I would have to check up on just to make sure, because sometimes it's just something like an extra thing just mentioned somewhat offhandedly, but then you have to be sure you are correct on that, even if it is just an offhanded reference, because if Injustice is not part of the broader DC, didn't they call it the Omniverse? If this multiverse is not part of that, same with the Arrowverse, then that would need to be addressed and corrected and removed if necessary. Perhaps as a result of this, elements of New Earth would begin to bleed over into Prime Earth, such as characters or relationships that had been wiped now making a comeback. With the reintroduction of the third Flash, Wally West, we learn that Barry did not create Earth Prime, sorry. We learn that Barry did not create Earth Prime. Instead, this was all the... Yeah, okay, so that needs to be corrected. That it's not, it's Prime Earth, not Earth Prime. I know, because both terms exist. Both exist in DC. There's Earth Prime, which is the original one that Superboy Prime is from, and there's Prime Earth, which is the New 52 one. Comics are stupid. We've established this. Let's move on. Barry did not create Prime Earth. Instead, this was all part of some master scheme by Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen, which came to a head with the 2017-19 event Doomsday Clock. Yeah, it took well over a year for that storyline to actually conclude. It's not just a big story event that has some times and whatnot. This was meant to be like the next big episode in the DCU, and it got dragged out for so long. We're just over halfway through this event at present, shows you when this was made roughly. But I can't see it bringing as big a change as Infinite Earths or Flashpoint. I don't think it did in the end. Actually, I'm not sure it even really amounted to anything. I guess in some ways it couldn't because it's gone on for so long. I don't know if they had tie-ins to it, and if they did, when they were there. Was there tie-ins early on? Were there tie-ins at the end? I don't know. Supposedly, New and Prime Earth were both merged by Mr. Oz, which I guess is supposed to explain Rebirth. I know that the New Earth Superman and Lois came over to the Prime Earth, and then they got merged with their counterparts and just took their lives over after they had died or something. It was really weird. At a certain point, DC should just do a full-on hard reboot. Like, fuck it. Just it's so much simpler if they just say, okay, wrap up your storylines, we're going to do a new take. Because this is just ridiculous. And that is the long and complicated history of the four main DC universes. It was at the time, you know. Now you have weird shit like there's Dark Knight's Death Metal, and there's another one that is a sequel to that, and I think it's that one where they have it that everybody remembers the past universes of the multiverse, even though those multiverses I think still exist. Unless they don't, I think they do. But like the characters have memories of those multiverse past universes, you know, they still they exist again. For the record, my favourite incarnation is New Earth. I love the massive Justice League roster and the element of legacy that is one of the few things DC had over Marvel, but is now mostly gone with the New 52. I'll be covering a number of these legacies in the future, as I did with the Bat Ladies last year. So I'd done the one on Batgirls and Batwomen, and I was planning to do stuff like Green Lantern or the Robins. Never got around to it. Those ones I might still make because they are not as complicated, because it really is just a case of explain who the character is, explain the transition from Robin to whatever else, then explain how the New 52 changed things for them, and then from there it's really just any other major events that happened. Oh, I guess I could mention the Rick Grayson era. Mention how DC just seems to have no idea really what to do with Jason. He's kind of stuck. They don't know whether to make him a villain or an anti-hero. But yeah, that's the entire video. I think in retrospect, if I were to actually go and try to complete this as a proper video, I would go back and condense a lot of this stuff down, because I don't think the full history of the DCU is strictly necessary. I mean, really, it's only 3 pages and a bit. That's weird. Yeah, I would have gone back and trimmed a lot of this stuff down, because now I don't think it's strictly necessary. You know, I wouldn't want to be working on this video for too long and explaining so much stuff. I would also need to do research into the death metal stuff. Obviously, you can read the events, obviously, but then you need to also understand how things go from there, what impact those changes had. So then you need to either read a bunch of other comics that might explain some stuff or might not. A lot of those are probably not going to be all that good, so the more convenient way would be to watch someone else summarizing it on YouTube, and then at that point it's like, is there really a point in me making this video when these other videos already exist explaining the same thing? I could just be talking about something more distinctive, something more specific to me, you know? And that's kind of the issue with videos like this. There is an appeal still. I'm sure there'll be people who have seen a bunch of videos about the history of the Robins and gone, still interested to see what you have to say about the Robins specifically. But then there'll be people who would say, I don't care about your opinions, I just want to see the facts. And so, you know, you have to pick a lane, and I don't know which lane I would pick. So thanks for tuning in. Please look forward to the Sonic video. Also, yes, I have read the Sonic and DC crossover. The full first one is out, and I've read that, and it's really good. And I'm eager to see where this new one goes. It's bringing in more characters. Looking forward to seeing where that one goes, because the last one was very fun. Let me know if you'd be interested in any of those other ones, like talk about the Green Lanterns or the Robins. The Robins haven't really gone through any major shake-ups since this, so it pretty much would still just be the main 5 plus a couple of notable multiverse ones like Helena. And with Green Lantern, if I'd made it back then, it would have been 6. But now with this, we're on like 7, I think, 7 Earth-based lanterns, maybe even an 8th one, plus Teen Lantern, who I'm pretty sure was 11 at the time, which is not a team. The pun doesn't work. yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in seeing those videos, and if so, I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, I'll just stick to Mortal Kombat or something. Let me know what you guys want to see. Watch whatever other slop I put out while I'm trying to work on this Sonic video, because this video might be really long. From today, on the 2nd, I have 3 weeks to get that video done, so wish me luck, guys. I'm fucked.